First of all, I want to get your reaction to the resignation of the Immigration Minister, Robert Jenrick, last night. What's Labour's response to that?
Well, it's an extraordinary situation. It seems that the government is now tearing itself apart. The Conservative Party is eating itself up over its failure to deal with this Rwanda situation. We've now got the third bill in 2 years. The previous two haven't worked. We have this issue bogged down in the courts, with many legal voices saying that this new bill will also be bogged down in the courts. And we had the extraordinary situation last night where the Prime Minister admitted that the Rwandan government had had to warn the UK government not to break international law. So, I mean, after all this, you've got to wonder what is the point of them if they're just going to carry on like this.
And yet the Prime Minister is insistent that this is the right law to sort the problem. He says it's the toughest piece of legislation on illegal immigration possible. So are you saying that it's too tough?
Well, he said this about the last two pieces of legislation that failed as well. It's not a matter of whether it's too tough. It's a matter of whether something works. And nothing that they've done up until now works. And there are many legal voices, not just legal voices, their own immigration minister who resigned yesterday, their former Home Secretary, they believe this will not work. They've now spent 140 million...
He thinks it won't work because it's not tough enough. So are you saying that that's the case? Do you agree that it's not tough enough?
No, I just think it's impractical. It won't work because you cannot simply make a declaration that a country is safe and make that so. That's the problem that they have. That's the problem that the court saw. And producing more declarations won't make a difference to that. They've got to do a different approach to this. It's a serious problem for the country. No country can be happy when thousands of people are arriving illegally on its shores. And the hard yards of this are about criminal enforcement, both in this country and in other countries, to crack down on the gangs who are organising this trade and try to stem the flow of these boats in the first place. Even if this Rwanda plan was to work, even if it was to work, the court has said Rwanda has capacity for a very small number of people, 100 or so every year. That's a tiny proportion
the point is it's
of the
supposed to be a
tens of
deterrent,
thousands.
isn't it?
Well, that's what they're saying now. There was an immigration minister doing the media rounds yesterday or the day before saying there was no cap on the numbers, implying it would be tens of thousands of people and so on. But the court says even if it worked, it would only be a small number of people. The truth is, this is expensive and it's failing, and they would be better spending the money devoted to this on the real hard yards of cracking down on a problem which is serious and should be taken seriously by any government.
How concerned is Labour about what this bill means for international law?
Well, I think it's an extraordinary situation where the Prime Minister of our country says we would have done more to break international law, but we were warned by the Rwandan government not to do so. That's what he said last night. It's not an accusation from Labour. He actually wrote this in his letter to Robert Jenrick. I don't think that's the way to go. The way to go is proper criminal enforcement against the gangs who are organising this trade in the first place.
Presumably Labour will vote against this bill.
Yeah, look, it's the third bill in 2 years. These declaratory bills haven't done anything, and so we're not going to support this bill. The first one that they passed a couple of years ago wasn't even implemented. The second one didn't work. Why should we believe the third one worked? They've managed to send more Home Secretaries to Rwanda than they have asylum seekers under this scheme. This is more now about managing the Conservative Party than tackling the problem. And I'm afraid that is far too often a feature of how the government behaves.
So Labour will vote against this bill. What do you think should happen if the bill were to be defeated?
If the bill were to be defeated, they should recognise that this scheme is not working. They shouldn't throw more money at it, and they should devote the resources to actually trying to tackle the problem, which is not just an immigration problem, by the way. It's a potential security problem if you've got people showing up on your shores illegally in small boats, and it should be treated as an international security problem. That's the way we should approach it.
The government says that Labour doesn't have a plan to stop the boats, that they're putting their legislation forward that they say will work. You talk about tackling criminal gangs, but that's been tried before. I mean, what evidence have you got that that's going to make a real difference?
Well, they could devote £140 million more to it if they weren't spending that on a scheme that hasn't sent a single asylum seeker to Rwanda. It's not the only thing that has to be done in the criminal enforcement. We've also got to speed up the processing of claims and end the use of hotels, which is costing the British taxpayer millions of pounds a day. Another thing that's arisen under the Conservative Party watch, this didn't used to happen. The backlog of claims has grown hugely, and that's what's feeding into the bill, because when the backlog of claims is there, people are caught in suspended animation, and you can't decide their claim. They need to decide the claims to see who's legitimate to be in the country and who's not, and they failed to do that as well.
But there are many people that criticise your own plan. They say it's unworkable too. They say that you're relying on EU or European countries taking back people who have crossed the channel. I mean, why would they want to do that?
Well, we're not going to sign up to any EU-wide scheme because we're not a member of the European Union and we don't have to sign up to such a scheme. But there is a case for working with other countries on family reunions in a two-way way, because that kind of cooperation with other countries is part of this issue. It's an international
So
issue.
you send some people back to a European country and they send people here?
Could be on a family reunion basis, on a case-by-case basis, but we're not signing up to any EU-wide scheme because we don't have to do that.
I'd want to ask you just a quick question as well about the COVID inquiry. We heard Boris Johnson's evidence yesterday. Do you welcome his apology?
Look, I think Boris Johnson at the COVID inquiry is all about Boris Johnson's reputation. You know, this is a guy who went AWOL at the start of COVID. He's been accused of being a weak Prime Minister by many of those around him, and he ended up being kicked out of Parliament for lying about breaking lockdown rules. So I don't think anyone will take his apology that seriously. His reputation is done now. I think the bigger question is the Prime Minister's appearance at the COVID inquiry, which is probably next week.